Let's talk some sports, baby.
And remember, make tomorrow better than today and make today better than yesterday. And you know what we gonna do. We gonna holler at you until next time, baby.
Wisdom with Jay Wise and Nathan Drinkard. I'm your host, Cody Ward. Thank you for spending some of your time with us tonight. As a reminder to all our listeners, this size be on all your favorite podcast platforms. A Drink of Wisdom is also on YouTube with each show segment available. Head on over and like what you hear. We'd appreciate your subscription. What's going on, fellas? Good to be back. A little hiatus, but we're back in action.
Just a wee bit of a hiatus, but definitely good to be back and a lot of things to get to. Let's go ahead and do it.
Let's talk some sports, baby. You know what it is. Glad to be back. Glad to do what we do. We got to speak. So everybody gonna pull up a seat and let's roll.
I like that run. All right, in episode 6, Phillies in first place somehow. The Lakers lead 2-1, and we recap the weekend in college football. Let's go ahead and begin tonight with the firing of Bill O Brien by the Houston Texans. The Texans head coach and GM was canned Monday after 6 full seasons with the team. The Texans are coming off a home loss to the Minnesota Vikings after a 3-game gauntlet to start the season versus Kansas City, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. They're really only competitive in the Pittsburgh game. Houston inked Deshaun Watson a big extension after back-to-back playoff runs, but traded away star wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins in the offseason. Things might look up for Houston with an easier schedule coming up, but it's clear now the Texans are heading towards big changes in the offseason. So, Jay, how surprised were you by this move, and was it the right call?
You may be shocked to hear this, but I was pretty surprised when I saw this. It's no secret that I've been critical of one Bill O Brien for the better part of the past, mostly since the infamous DeAndre Hopkins trade, which is haunting the man to this day. I gotta believe that's part of this. But you're 0-4, we understand, but we also got to keep in mind a few things. The schedule that they've played so far has been brutal. It's a sad thing when you roll into the season and you have to face the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens to start off the year. I mean, we just penciled in those 2 L's automatically. The Pittsburgh Steelers were next. Pittsburgh looks mighty good. They're 3-0. Big Ben Roethlisberger looks back in form to some extent, and that defense is still very fierce. And then, you get the Minnesota Vikings, the battle of the 0-3s, but Minnesota's they're not as bad as their record, or at least I can't imagine they're that bad. I think we all expected them to win that division this year. But this is a difficult start. But we got to remember a couple things. You recall in 2018 the Houston Texans, they started 0-3, and then they ran off 9 in a row and finished 11-5. And I know 0-4 is different, but this is something that Houston, they've been able to overcome a very difficult start before, and not saying that they would this time, but a lot of this part of this is due to a tough schedule. But then again, you also have to keep in mind, and this is the thing when we talk about Bill O Brien, there's good things and bad things about Bill O Brien, and I will always defend this man for the job he did the early part of his tenure with the Houston Texans, because it wasn't until Deshaun Watson was drafted that the man had a real quarterback. Think about some of these guys. When you go Brock Osweiler, Tom Savage, Case Keenum, T.J. Yates. I'm sure there's a couple dudes that I'm leaving out.
Ryan Mallett in there somewhere. Yeah.
There could be a Ryan Mallett, another random waterfowl in there. We don't know. We'd have to look it up, and it'd be an extensive list that we'd have to get.
A random what?
Waterfowl, a bird that goes in the water. Come on, folks. Listen. Even with those, I'm trying to be polite. I really am. But even with I'll say lackluster. With these lackluster individuals throwing the football up and down the field, Bill O Brien was able to reel off 3 consecutive 9-7 records with them. And then, of course, we have a 4-12 season. But now you have Deshaun Watson. You go 11-5, 10-6. He won a playoff game with Brock Osweiler. Don't forget that. and Deshaun Watson led them on in some ways, a miraculous comeback against the Buffalo Bills last season. But then these are the negatives. The past several years with Deshaun Watson, Houston's just been mightily inconsistent. You don't know what you're going to get from them week to week. And quite honestly, you don't know from time to time what you're going to get within the same game. I mean, think about it. All you have to do is go back to last season in the AFC divisional round after they beat those Buffalo Bills, and they roll in to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And, they're up 24-0 to start the game. And I don't think anyone believed for a minute that it was real, because that's just what we've come to expect with the Houston Texans under Bill O Brien. And what happens? Well, Kansas City goes on out scoring 51-7 for the rest of the game. It was a sight to behold. But we also have to remember, Bill O'Brien is not being judged as a head coach. For over a calendar year now, Bill O'Brien he's basically been the de facto GM. And some of his personnel decisions have been quite awful. We go back to the Jadeveon Clowney trade. This is where this all started. And not that Jadeveon Clowney has been anything great since then, but this is still a premier talent as a pass rusher. That remains to be the case. And you let him go for, I don't know, a couple of dudes that we would have to Google at this point. And then you had, we know you brought in Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills. You're trying to fix that offensive line, give you a weapon. But I'm just, I'm of the mindset I think Tunsil's a little overrated. I know he wants to be the highest paid tackle in football. I'm just not seeing it. I see too many penalties and mistakes from Laramie Tunsil, even though his talent is not to be questioned. And then, of course, we already mentioned the DeAndre Hopkins trade and what a disaster that was. You had the Arizona Cardinals team Twitter account actively trolling this man and the Houston Texans because it was a flat-out heist. That's what it was. And you have to – the reason that was so ridiculous, you have to remember DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's a top 3 receiver in this league, but you also have to consider the chemistry that he and Deshaun Watson had. I think their chemistry was one of the best and perhaps the best chemistry between a wide receiver and quarterback in the league. When you have a guy like that and a quarterback and a young stud like Deshaun Watson, that's not something you mess with. I don't think it is. I will say, I think the group of weapons that they cobbled together in the offseason, I mean, it's a serviceable group. When you talk about Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, even Kenny Stills, that's a serviceable group. But none of those guys, we don't look at any of those guys as a surefire number 1 receiver. Brandon Cooks could be on 1 on some teams, but at best. But normally you'd like to have him as a top end number 2 guy. None of those guys is a DeAndre Hopkins where you can just snap the ball and look over there and say, oh, I don't care. Even when he's covered, he's open. You can do that with DeAndre Hopkins. They don't have that anymore. And they trade him for David Johnson, who, I mean, he's been okay, but I don't think he's been nothing. He hasn't been the 2016 David Johnson, which is the idea, we posed originally. You're trading for a guy who used to be some type of good. He's no longer that level of a player. So when you consider all that, I'm not saying this wasn't something that should have happened as the season went along. But at this point, I just don't like the timing of this. I think it's too early in the season to, pull the plug on it completely. The AFC South, I think, is one of those divisions. I don't see a great team out there. I think Indianapolis looks good. I know Tennessee's 3-0, but I'm still not completely sold on them. I just look at that. I'd look at that division as a division that could be a 9 to 10 win division. And I think Houston, when you look at Deshaun Watson, the schedule will ease up for them. He's a guy who's capable of getting hot as any quarterback in the league, and we know how important that can be. But to me, it's the timing of it. That's why I disagree with it. Although, I would have liked to see how this played out for the entire season and then make a decision. To me, this is a little bit unfair to Bill O'Brien. And I will tell you who really is at fault here to me. I think the Texans ownership is at fault. That's who I think is at fault. I think they've been asleep at the wheel for the better part of last year. And because of that, I mean, you let Bill O'Brien, quite frankly, you let this man have too much responsibility and control. Bill O'Brien to me, I think he's a slightly above average head coach. Now that's fine, but you don't give a slightly above average head coach all the power of personnel. I think that's the critical mistake that they made. And because of that, I'm putting this more on ownership than Bill O'Brien.
Okay. Jay, let me pose a question to you. When the last time you seen an owner fire an owner?
You're right. It's not going to happen. You're right.
So with that said, it could be the owner fault all they want. Somebody got to get fired, and let's just say the guy that with his name at the bottom of the check ain't firing himself. So listen, as far as the question go, it's about damn time. Get him out of here. Listen, if you want to sit here and give me the riff-raff about as a coach, he shouldn't have been fired, no problem. I would agree with you. I would agree with most people if they say he shouldn't. I think he did a average to above average coaching job. He's done a fine job. I mean, you heard the list of names that he got from the strap yard. We heard it. All right. It's no need to fuss about that. But as far as a GM, he got a flat out F. It's a flat out F. There's no way you can sugarcoat it, water it down. It was terrible. Even Texas fans would tell you it was terrible. Flat out F. Maybe the ownership felt like whenever they woke up, then maybe they felt like, hey, we can't separate one from the other. We just got to get rid of them. We got to cut ties. So they just fired him for the overall job. You know, sometimes you can get an A in one part and then you get a D in the next part and then they slap it together and they give you an average. And you're like, dang, it's kind of low. It happens like that. That's what happened to him. His average was a little low, so they went on and packed the bags earlier. Because for what you said, you think if he would have stayed, they would have gotten the playoffs. Or am I wrong?
I don't think they would have made the playoffs. I think they would have improved. I don't think they're a team that's 0-4. That probably translates to what, 3-13, 4-12. I think they win 6 to 7 games this year. I think that was about what I expected them. Period. What my overall point is, I think 4 weeks into a season is just too early to punt on a season. That's what I think.
What? Like why? Like if you're
they were just 0-3 2 years ago, and they came back. They overcame that.
That was 2 years ago. That was That was 2 years ago. Who they had on their team? DeAndre Hopkins? They had Clowney on their team too. I mean, listen, what are you talking about 2 years ago? Listen.
My point,
you know what I'm saying?
My point on ownership, this is where I think they dropped the ball. Bill O'Brien is not the guy. He was a head coach. What they should have done, you fire the GM, bring another GM there. Don't give this man too much responsibility. He's not an elite head coach. So why would you give a non-elite head coach all the power in the world? I think that's where they made the mistake.
All right. So let me speak. Like the moderator said, let me speak. All right.
Oh, no.
So here's the deal. Whether you fire him now or the end of the season, because I don't think he would have survived the end of the season either, why not go ahead and let's do some spring cleaning? Let's go and get him out of here. We don't got to wait on Black Monday. We can get him out of here now. Because when you sign the checks, guess what you get to do? Fire people whenever the hell you want to. So guess what? They fire him whenever the hell they wanted to. And here's the deal, right? I think they just getting ready for the new regime. You got a young quarterback. You just signed to a new contract. You got a bunch of guys out here that don't add up to DeAndre Hopkins if you put all three of them together. So now you're thinking to yourself, it's time for a facelift. Let's go ahead and get Bill O'Brien in here. I mean, he shouldn't be mad. He's been getting free money for the last I don't know how long because he's been stinking up the joint for years. So he should be okay. Matter of fact, he should have had boxes already in his office because he knew this day was going to come very soon, sooner than later. So I don't understand the outrage. Like, you cannot tell me we have not been talking about this guy for the last 2 or 3 years thinking, like, yo, where the dirty pictures at? He ain't been fired yet? What are we doing here? Especially from the GM spot. Maybe the coaching job, okay. He was hanging on like a chandelier from the coach's job. But the GM, he was out of here. No. It's my thinking, as you watch the landscape of the NFL, everybody's getting younger. We just seen Matt Rule come in with the awesome 10-year contract or 12-year contract, whichever one. It's about maybe the Texans are saying, listen, it's our time to make our move. Let's start talking dirty to Lincoln Riley or in Oklahoma. Or let's go over to Fox and say, hey, Urban, you feeling that itch a little bit? You want to come back? You You want to draw up those X's and O's again? Like, it's a lot of young, and it's some guys I'm not even thinking about that. I heard their name pop up. I just feel like the Texans, they just want to move in a new direction. Whether fair or unfair, I just feel like they getting tired of getting creamed because of the shenanigans that's happening with their organization. And it's like every time something happens, the first thing we say is, where are the owners? Where are the owners through all this? And they over there asleep. They want to be on vacation and not be bothered sometimes. They want to be known as winners. They getting tired of Bill O Brien. The butt chin got to go. It's time to get a coach that we can rely on. And here's the deal. I think Lincoln Riley and Urban Meyer are going to be the first two calls that they make. If both of those gentlemen turn down the options, then we'll see where they go. Because we know this. Here's what we know. Romeo Crennel, he might be the interim coach, and that's about as far as it goes. And if he act a fool, he might get fired too, just so we can put the icing on the cake, because that's how we getting down around here. We're going to turn this to a whole complete circus. But the person I feel the worst for is Deshaun Watson, because here's the deal. Deshaun Watson, he's getting crapped on up, down, left, and right. You might well start calling him toilet seat the way they just keep crapping on him. It's getting ridiculous that you got a prime-time quarterback like this, and what are we doing here? This is how good quarterbacks in their career end up going down the toilet, and you start underappreciating what it is that they do, because you got to think of the whole clown show on the side. And so I think when it's all said and done, that ownership need to put in Deshaun Watson and make sure he okay. Like, hey, bro, I understand we're doing you pretty dirty out here, but is there anything else we could do for you? Like, who could we go out here and trade away 10% of the organization to? Because that's all we got to trade, because everybody else got our picks. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I really feel bad for Deshaun Watson and all of this. But at the end of the day, to answer the question, you're damn right it was the right call. You're damn right. And listen, by no means am I saying you're wrong, Jay, because you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. I just stand on the other side of this. Sometimes you just get enough of this crap. It's like, come on, bro. How much rope do we have to give you before you hang yourself? You can't say it would be one thing if he was on the GM for 3 years and the coach for 3 years and then they fired him. He's been there for a while. He had more than enough time to right this ship. And how Deshaun Watson been there, 4 years? Right? So even though we know he didn't have hot garbage as, quarterbacks, BFI bins, but still, what have you done when you had Deshaun Watson? Give me that AFC Championship game we went to. Give me the crown and jewel win. You won a wild card game. Thanks, man. And then we got smoked the very next week. Like, that ain't good enough. That just ain't good enough. So it's about time to go ahead and change this thing up. And you know what I'm saying? Hey, it is what it is. Now he can go holler at Doc Rivers and see, how you get back on your feet. And that's what it is.
Can I just say, just to close out with me and you, I do wholeheartedly agree with your point on Deshaun Watson. And I think I've said a couple times, based on how the organization looks, once they traded DeAndre Hopkins, that would have been the point for Deshaun Watson. Like, do I really want to sign here? If you're trading my best target away, who, I mentioned the chemistry between those guys, I was a little surprised when he signed the extension, and now, he's going to, hopefully it works out for him with the new regime. But the organization it just doesn't look that well put together right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Texans, when you look at it, really what it comes down to is we know how football and coaching in football works to a degree. If you're not getting better every year, you're failing, right? That's how it is. Mark Richt was in Georgia for 15 years, but he never could get over the hump. There's plenty of coaches like that can't get past a certain point. And the Texans, I think, realized we're probably not getting past that point. You can look at the schedule, right? You can go, well, come on. That's the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Steelers. And, well, you're going to have to beat those teams in the playoffs. And you got smoked by 2 of them. And then the Steelers, you hung around for a half. But Bill did his master plan in the offseason. He traded all his dudes. And when the smoke cleared, he had an average running back. You could sign 20 guys right now to do the same job that David Johnson's doing. they have like 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks in the offensive line for like 3 players total. I mean, he's thrown the kitchen sink at this from their perspective. He's burned all their resources. He burned their money. He gave Randall Cobb $18 million, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And out of the gate, they got smacked like 3 or 4 times. I mean, I feel like if he would have at least won one of those games of the 3, not really count the Vikings as a whole separate thing. If he would have won one of those 3, it'd been like, okay, well, hey, we're showing some life. They didn't really show any life. I mean, other than the Steelers hanging around for a half. And at the end of the day, the expectation for the Houston Texans, we signed Deshaun Watson. We made all these trades. We want to go deep in the playoffs. And, you just it can't start like that. And the thing is, if the ownership woke up and they said, all right, this guy's getting fired, whether you fire him at the end of the year or now, to me, it doesn't matter so much just because, I mean, if he's going to be fired, just fire him. Don't let him sit around and win you a bunch more games and then go, all right, Bill, we knew you were fired in week 4. We just thought we'd let you hang out for the rest of the year. I mean, I get it. Like, you could say, I get the argument of saying, well, maybe he should have had more time. Maybe he should have. He could have righted the ship. You get Jacksonville, Cleveland, Detroit. There's some easy games coming up, NFL standards wise. But if the ownership really decided, hey, this is it, we're done, he should have been gone. But I will say, Jay, you are absolutely right. This is a failure in ownership, and this is not just the Texans. I mean, many team owners just are disconnected. They don't care, and a GM requires the coach or the owner to actually put in the work to find a new one. If you have a GM, then the coach isn't your problem. But for this case, it was, and it's not really fair to Bill O'Brien. One, we don't know if he really was supposed to be the GM in 2019 or if that just kind of fell to him. But where is that successful besides New England? I mean, I don't think there's any other example recently where that really works. So there's a reason that personnel decisions and coaching decisions are usually separate.
But that is the inherent risk you take when you do both jobs. That, like, you can easily be like, no, I don't want the GM job because I don't want to be attached to that. Hire a GM. That's not what they do though. Everybody want to be Bill and say, hey, I want to do both jobs. Okay. Cool, you do both jobs, but when you get fired for one of them, you're going to lose both of them. Yep. That's just what it is.
But that Bill O'Brien didn't walk in with a shotgun and point at the owner and say, I want both jobs. Like, he was given that role. And to me, that's not Bill O'Brien's fault. I mean, and they say, hey, Bill, I want you to be the GM now, too. I mean, he probably should have said, no, I'm good. But
exactly.
Most
people could have said that.
I see where you're going. That's not a natural inclination, though. Like, generally, when you're like offered more responsibility and like more power, you're gonna take it, even though it may not necessarily be the right decision.
You take the risk with the reward.
You probably thought, hey, I'm as good of a choice as any, so yeah, sure. And then it didn't work out. So, but that to me, that's on the ownership as much as it's on Bill O'Brien. I mean, you get offered the job, I mean, hell, why not type thing. So I'll leave it with this. One of the other problems that the Texans have is Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. They drafted at the same time, within 2 picks of each other, Mahomes and Watson. They've been compared throughout their careers. And I think Houston was trying to keep up with the Joneses, and they kept trying to spend money on stuff they couldn't afford while your neighbor's making more money next door. And now the Chiefs got a ring and all their dudes are locked up. And the Texans, I tell you, whoever gets this job besides Watson, there's not a lot of talent on this roster. There's a lot of fat contracts, and there are not a lot of draft picks in the cupboard. So it's gonna be a bit of a challenge.